Imagine spending years building your life in the United Kingdom, your job, your community, your children's school, and then being told that the rules you planned your entire future around have just changed overnight. No vote, no debate, no warning. Just a government announcement, and suddenly everything you worked for is on a completely different timeline. That is not a hypothetical. That is what happened this week in Britain. And if you are a skilled worker, a refugee, or anyone planning to make the UK your permanent home, what I am about to break down affects you directly, right now. Welcome to GoUKGo. Let's get into it. The UK Home Secretary, Shabana Mahmood, has just fired the first shot in what promises to be the most aggressive immigration overhaul Britain has seen in decades. And here is what makes this moment genuinely historic. She did not wait for Parliament. She did not need a single vote from a single MP. She rewrote the rules using powers the Home Secretary already holds, and just like that, Phase 1 of her crackdown is already law. This is not a rumor. This is not a leaked document. The 30-month refugee protection cut came into effect on Thursday. And while most people are still trying to understand what that means, Mahmood is already building the legal framework for Phase 2. A bill that will double or even quadruple how long it takes skilled workers and refugees to qualify for permanent settlement in the UK. In this video, I am going to walk you through exactly what changed on Thursday and why most people are completely misreading it. I will explain the Denmark model Mahmood keeps referencing, what it actually achieved, and whether Britain can genuinely replicate it post-Brexit. I will break down the political rebellion forming inside the Labour Party itself, and I will tell you what the 20-year refugee timeline really signals about what is coming for skilled workers. Because these things are connected, and once you see the full picture, the direction of travel becomes very, very clear. Let us start with the change that is already law, because I think a lot of people are underestimating how significant Thursday actually was. Under the old system, a person granted asylum in the United Kingdom received 5 years of temporary protection. 5 years to live, work, build a career, raise a family, learn the language, integrate into their community. After those 5 years, they could apply for indefinite leave to remain, permanent residency, if they still needed protection. That was the deal. That was the framework millions of people planned their lives around. That framework no longer exists. From Thursday, newly approved asylum seekers receive 30 months of temporary protection. 2.5 years. After those 30 months, the Home Office reviews whether their country of origin is now considered safe. If it is deemed safe, and the government controls that definition, their protection expires and they are expected to leave. There is no automatic path to permanent settlement. There is no guaranteed continuation. There is a review, a judgment call, and a potential removal. This applies to adults and to accompanied children claiming asylum. And crucially, it did not require parliamentary approval because Mahmood used existing executive powers to rewrite immigration rules. That is the part that should make every single viewer sit up straight, because it tells you something essential about how this government intends to operate. When she had the power to act unilaterally, she did. She did not wait for consensus. She did not invite debate. She moved. Now, the bigger changes, the 10-year indefinite leave to remain timeline for skilled workers, and the 20-year timeline for refugees, those do require new primary legislation, a full act of parliament. Mahmood has confirmed it is coming later this year. But after watching her implement Phase 1 without a single vote, is there any serious reason to believe she will hesitate on Phase 2? Mahmood has been very deliberate about citing Denmark as her blueprint, and it is worth understanding exactly what Denmark did, because the results are genuinely remarkable, and the complications are genuinely significant. Denmark began toughening its asylum policy in the mid-2010s, driven by the Social Democrats, Labour's sister party, under Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen. Her government's core argument was straightforward. Uncontrolled immigration was placing unsustainable pressure on working-class communities, and the social contract required tough action. They moved to a temporary stay model where asylum seekers are housed in reception centers, have their biometrics taken, and are given health checks, but are never offered a pathway to permanent settlement as a default. The results? Denmark has reduced asylum applications to their lowest level in 40 years. They remove 95% of rejected asylum seekers. The model deters arrivals by making it structurally clear that Denmark is not a destination for permanent settlement. Mahmood visited Denmark personally on a fact-finding trip. She toured a reception center on the outskirts of Copenhagen and visited a return center where migrants stay before deportation. Communal canteens, outdoor exercise equipment, sparse accommodation with single beds and lockers. She came back convinced. She stated publicly that the reset in Britain's asylum offer, inspired by Denmark's success, will encourage those wishing to build a life in the UK to use legal routes and reduce the pull factors driving illegal migration. But here's the honest question that no one in government is answering directly. Can Britain actually replicate what Denmark does? Denmark has the infrastructure for rapid returns. They have bilateral agreements with countries that accept deportees. They operate within the European Union, with cooperation mechanisms and legal frameworks that make cross-border enforcement far more efficient. They have broad political consensus across mainstream parties that supports tough asylum policy. Britain, post-Brexit, has none of that. Britain can absolutely implement a 30-month temporary protection window. That is just rule changes. But actually removing people when that protection expires, that requires countries to accept returnees. Many simply do not. Britain spent years and enormous political capital on the Rwanda scheme and never transferred a single asylum seeker before Labour scrapped it. Without functioning returns, temporary protection does not deter crossings. It just puts people in limbo for 30 months, after which many disappear into irregularity. The policy changes the paperwork. It does not necessarily change the outcome. Now let us talk about the internal Labour revolt, because 80 MPs preparing to vote against their own government is a significant number. But the political maths are more complicated than the headline suggests. Labour currently holds a parliamentary majority of 174 seats. Even if 80 Labour MPs vote against the government, that on its own is not enough to defeat the legislation, unless the Conservatives and Reform UK also vote against it. And here's the thing. They almost certainly will not. The Conservatives are likely to abstain or vote in favor while criticizing specific details as not going far enough. Reform UK has openly called for abolishing indefinite leave to remain entirely. They are not going to save a rebellion aimed at being more lenient. So the legislation will almost certainly pass. The rebellion's real power is not in defeating the bill. It is in forcing concessions. When enough of your own MPs publicly threaten to vote against you, you negotiate. You offer amendments, you create transitional protections. And that is exactly what the rebellion may ultimately achieve. Not stopping the 10-year ILR timeline, but ensuring that people already in the UK on a 5-year pathway are not suddenly subject to the new rules retroactively. That transitional protection question is the most important detail in the legislation we have not yet seen. Will people currently on a 5-year route to permanent residency stay on that pathway? Or does the 10-year rule apply immediately to everyone? The answer to that question determines whether this crackdown feels like a policy change or a betrayal to hundreds of thousands of legal migrants who made life decisions based on existing rules. Senior Labour figures are already making their opposition public. London Mayor Sadiq Khan wrote a column over the weekend, warning that attempting to outcompete Reform UK on immigration feels inauthentic and like a betrayal of Labour's values. That is not a backbench MP grumbling. That is a major Labour figure drawing a very direct line. The rebellion is also pointing to electoral consequences. Labour recently lost the Gorton and Denton by-election to the Greens, a seat that was once considered rock-solid Labour territory. The party's left wing is blaming Mahmood's hardline approach, arguing it has alienated Muslim voters and progressive voters who do not support a Denmark-style crackdown. But Mahmood has a counter-argument that is genuinely difficult to dismiss. On Wednesday alone, 605 people crossed the English Channel. Over 2,200 have made the crossing so far this year. Every boat that lands strengthens her political argument. Public polling consistently shows immigration as one of the British public's top concerns. Voters want visible action. And Mahmood is betting that delivering that visible action, 30-month protection cuts, extended ILR timelines, Denmark model implementation, plays better with the electorate than internal Labour unity does. Let me be direct about why you are watching this video, because it is almost certainly not about refugee policy in the abstract. If you are a skilled worker on a 5-year pathway to indefinite leave to remain, you are watching this refugee crackdown and running the same calculation in your head. If the government is willing to make refugees wait 20 years for permanent status, they are absolutely willing to make skilled workers wait 10. And if Mahmood implemented Phase 1 without a parliamentary vote, there is no political or procedural barrier stopping her from pushing the 10-year timeline through, regardless of rebellion. The 20-year refugee figure is extreme by design. It makes the 10-year skilled worker timeline sound moderate and reasonable by comparison. That is strategic framing, and it is working. The policy conversation has already shifted. We are no longer debating whether to extend ILR timelines. We are debating by how much. The justification Mahmood uses is identical across both groups. Britain's immigration system, she argues, has become a pull factor. Too generous, too accessible, too easy to transition into permanent settlement. The solution is to make everything temporary. Make settlement a genuine long-term aspiration rather than a near-term expectation, and force people to use legal routes by reducing the reward for irregular entry. Whether you agree with that argument or not, it is the framework driving every decision being made right now, and understanding it is essential to understanding what comes next. The new primary legislation is expected in autumn 2026 at the earliest. Between now and then, channel crossing numbers will do more to shape the political landscape than any rebellion will. If crossings continue at current rates or increase over the summer, Mahmood's position strengthens and the rebellion's credibility weakens. If crossings drop significantly, she is vindicated. If they continue regardless of the crackdown, the entire model comes into question. Here is where things stand right now. Phase 1 is done. The 30-month refugee protection cut is already law, implemented without a single parliamentary vote. Phase 2, the 10-year ILR timeline for skilled workers and the 20-year timeline for refugees, is coming through new legislation later this year. And based on everything Mahmood has signaled, she intends to push it through. 80 Labour MPs are preparing to fight her. London's mayor has publicly warned this approach is a betrayal of Labour values. The party just lost what should have been a safe seat. And yet, channel crossings are still happening at a rate that gives Mahmood all the political cover she needs. The Denmark model she is trying to replicate reduced asylum claims to a 40-year low. But Denmark has tools, treaties, and EU infrastructure that Britain simply does not have anymore. Whether this crackdown actually reduces crossings or whether it just changes the timeline for people who are already here, that is the question that will define whether Mahmood looks visionary or reckless by the time autumn arrives. If you are a skilled worker, a refugee, or anyone with a stake in UK immigration policy, you need to be watching the new immigration bill extremely closely when it lands. I will be breaking down every single provision, the amendments being proposed, the transitional protection clauses, and what the final version actually means for people already living in Britain. If this video helped you understand what is really happening and why it matters, please hit the like button right now. It genuinely helps this channel reach more people who need this information. Subscribe to GoUKGo so you do not miss the next video when the immigration bill drops. And drop a comment below. Do you think the Labour rebellion can force real transitional protections? Or is Mahmood's position too strong to be moved? I read every comment, and I want to know what you think. This is GoUKGo. Stay informed, stay ahead. I will see you in the next one.